Hey there, welcome to another episode of Animating with TVPaint Animation Pro. This week we're going to be doing a little bit something different. We're going to be working on a water effect tutorial. As you can see here, I'm working on trying to get down the bubble and trying to figure out how to get the effect that we want, which is popping of the bubble. So as I enlarge it here, we're going to try to um, get the basic shape of this bubble and how it's going to react to as it pops open. So I'm going to go ahead and flood fill the back side of the bubble to distinguish the front of the pop and the rear of the pop, so that way it gives it more dimensions and more depth. So I was setting my my range so that the flood fill will be full and not have more of an outline. So I'm going to continue on and draw the next frame. As you can see, I'm using a brush that I cut out that has the same geometry as the first bubble I put down on the screen, and all I have to do is resize it and reposition it. And then we're gonna just take and modify this bubble. And here I'm showing you how to, after I'm using the brush tool, I am going to erase the parts that I do not need on the bubble, so that way we can continue to create the expansion of the bubble as it is popping. And remember that this is on water, and because it's on water, the bubble is reacting to surface tension, which will cause when the bubble pops, it causes it to pop and expand outwards. So I'm just going to go here and draw a little bit the pop of the bubble. The top of it is going to come out and start to collapse, which again comes with the surface tension of the bubble. And because of the force that's within the bubble, the air that is trapped, and when it pops, these little pieces that come off the side are from the force of the air that's within the bubble being released. And again, that's due to both the surface tension of the water and also the collapse of the bubble. And usually the bubbles will collapse on the thinning or the thin part of the surface of the bubble. So right now I'm just trying to trace the backside of the bubble itself as it is receding into the water as it breaks. And remember, all these, for a better word, tentacles or bits of water that are collapsing, the more random they look, the more natural the bubble pop will seem. So this is one of those effects that you can do that doesn't take too much planning, as long as you know exactly where you want the bubble set up in your scene on the tension on the water. And usually this is for like mellow scenes or things like after a rain or during a light rain. These effects can add a lot of mood to your story and to your scene. So as you can see, I'm coloring again the back end of this bubble on the ring. And this is again to give depth and also separate the foreground from the background of the shape. I'm just adjusting my brush size so that I can get a very thin line to erase some of the back ring that's on the surface of the water. So that way the more dominant ring edge will be up front and the lighter one will be in back. And this is kind of like so you can tell it's through liquid, or you can see it through liquid, which will be a lighter color or distorted. So it's just keeping in mind down the road, trying to keep things straight so that when you have to put it all together and color it and do the final pass, that you're able to, you already have it mapped out. So that way your production can be a little faster. So here I'm just drawing a little bit of the bubbles that pop the liquid particles that are coming up off the bubble itself. They're pieces. So we're going to go ahead and draw another frame, and we're going to use the last, the same bubble brush that I created. And again, this bubble brush you guys can, from one of my other videos where we showed you how to use the brush tool to create a brush out of an object. It's really good for creating repetitions, so that way you can keep the size and the volume of your objects or your characters. So again, I'm just erasing a little bit of the back end rim to give it a little bit lighter color as it's fading, and I erased some of the main bubble edge, so that way we can recede that bubble as it's collapsing into the water. And you'll notice that we'll be taking and shooting some of the bubble particles up and out, and they'll start disconnecting from the main fluid or liquid of the bubble as it recedes into the water. Again, this can just be a little bit random. It doesn't need to be perfect. And you'll just notice that as I go to the right, drawing these concave lines to denote the liquid receding and it being popped at the same time, that they go in the direction of how the bubble is, the curvature of the bubble. And as you can see, I'm drawing the bubble of the liquid, the parts of the liquid that broke off, and these pieces will be launched and the gravity will be affected upon them, and we'll just later on we'll draw them as they're dropping towards the surface and create ripples as they splash down. As you can see, it's starting to work out. The bubble pops and it collapses, and bits and particles of the fluid start flying off. There will be particles that will be flying off both in the foreground and in the background. So you have to decide where they're going to land, because not all of the little particle bubbles of the bubble, they're not all going to land in the same spot. There's going to be totally random. But at the same time, they're not random because you're planning out exactly the arch and how they're falling towards the water surface. So I'm going to go back here and draw the back end of the collapsed bubble, just to give it a little bit a little bit more of its collapse. It's receding into the water. And then we'll color it so that way we can differentiate again the backdrop or the background from the foreground. Gotta love that undo button. Very helpful tools when you're animating, helps speed up your workflow if you know the interface and how to use shortcuts. That was caused just because I tried to flood fill outside of the shape itself, so it actually flood filled the whole screen, which is, any action is undoable. You can set the number of undo actions within the preference menu, but usually I set mine to be, right around 100. It all depends on the memory and capacity of your computer. So I zoomed in close so I can get the inside details of the inside rim of the bubble so I can fill those in. And again, this also helps me distinguish what's receding, what's not, and where the particles of the bubble are gonna recede into. So we're gonna go ahead and fill on this frame. We're just gonna delete this frame since we already edited the last frame. And I'm just gonna go here and split the frame so I can just take the picture or the image from the last frame and use it for this frame. So we're just going to go ahead and modify using an eraser, and we're just going to erase the back edge here a little bit, and what it'll do is it'll give it a kind of a nice fluidic look to it, and it's going to look like it's been it's receding further into the water, and just bits and particles are going to remain. And as we go along down the creating more and more keyframes, we'll have to erase the water particles that are shooting off and use the light board to be able to see where we want to place the particles that are flying off further down. And again, these are based on gravity, direction, force, momentum, and all these apply to kind of calculate where they're going to fall in the water. So we're just adjusting in the front end. We're taking it down even further just to give it to complete the animated effect for it to pop. Eventually there's only going to be a ring left. And as you can see, I'm just continually taking and extending these water particles from the last frame. Some break up, some don't, some actually join together. I think I'm going to be joining together at least one or two of these particles so they all land at the same spot. Now this top one needs to be advanced further, but as you can see, the gravity is starting to take effect on it, so it's kind of like at the high point, and then it's gonna start curving downwards and towards the water surface. So just scrubbing the line to make sure that the animation is moving forward and fluid as we want it to. Make sure that the effect is being achieved, and we're just adding a couple more particles, planning on to enhance the splashdown effect of the final ripple. So we're going to go ahead and add another keyframe here. again, I keep using the same water brush. This gives me my consistency, also the mass or thickness of my lines. Anytime you can try to make sure that your all your lines and your mass are consistent, you should learn shortcuts to do that. That way it will speed up your workflow, but it also will give more, your animation will be more smooth as you produce your animations. That way you can do less iterations. You don't have to, sometimes you don't even have to go back, and you can just use the animatic for the main animation, and all you have to do is a little bit of cleanup. So I'm just emphasizing the front end of this bubble, just using the oval part. And from here we're just gonna animate the particles that have shot off from the bubble pop, because right now the bubble has already fully popped and the ring is all that's left in the water from the ripple from the main bubble itself, the base. So we're just gonna take and enhance the ring to make look like it's starting to ripple outwards. And I'm just testing out what kind of ripples we can use for the particles that are going to be landing upon the water. And this is just a test phase, just to, you know, try to place how the ripples will look and get a brush down that I can use. I'll be constantly taking and resizing these brushes so that way I can get the right thickness and the right look for these rings for the particles as they hit the water's surface. And this helps sell the realism of the effect you're trying to produce. And it is, you know, a little complicated just to do a popping bubble, but you know, everything, even the smallest detail is a work in animation and a work. It's just, you know, it gives you such pride and such fulfillment just to be able to even do a simple bubble. So again, I split the scene so that we can continue on with the same image, and I'm just gonna find out where I'm placing the water particles and also the ripples, the ripple effect. So I'm gonna go back and draw these in a little heavier. As you go along and produce these, you can also try to create your own tool set. I'm gonna probably go into more further detail in a later video on how to create your own tool sets, so that way you can import your tools from if you're working on a production, you can import them, and you can create consistent lines, consistent effects, and it will all have the same stylized lines and look of your animation, which is really helpful because you don't have to go back and you have to keep recreating each one of these tools. So I'm trying to find out where the water drops are going to be hitting the surface of the water, or where we're going to place those ripples as soon as they hit. It looks a little flat now, but once you get the ripple down and you can copy and paste or create more ripples outwards, it'll sell the look and feel of the effect. I'm just gonna redo the ripple, make sure we got the one that I am trying to paint that coincides with my last frame. So I go ahead and place it down. That way, because the water hasn't hit the surface yet, and I already laid down the ripples for it, for where it hit, So what I thought, it was just a lot easier just to go back and delete it all, and then once have the water right where the surface of the water is, that's where I can place my ripples. So I'm gonna wait till these water droplets hit the water to place those ripples. But now I got those brushes into my tool history, or my brush history. We can use those a little bit. So as you can see, some of these water particles are nice and spread out and randomized. And now we're just going to go ahead and add the ripples to those since they have hit the water. As you can see, we've done this in almost like 9 frames. And the reason why is because if you've ever seen reference video of a bubble popping, you will notice that the bubble pops and the water shoots off and drops into the water, causing ripples very dramatically and fast. So we're just replicating this, and you know, later on, if you feel that the timing is not quite right, you can extend some frames to, you know, be animated on 2s or 3s depending on how fast or slow or dramatic you want the scene to be. So I'm just animating the water droplets that are in the back of the bubble that had been popped. And there they fall and they hit the surface. So all we have to do now is create where the bubbles land, where the droplets land. So I'll go ahead and add another keyframe using the same brush. Hopefully if I can find the right one. It'll eventually be there. Small. Gotta love that undo button. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna place that down, and then we're gonna find the smaller ripples, brush, and make them lighter so that way they can be differentiated from the main ripple. And we're just gonna lighten this up, because as the ripple expands or decays, it will get lighter and lighter on the surface of the water. Right now I'm just using like a, you know, you can use anywhere between 20 and 30% opacity. The opacity will create like the line to be only erased so that it can only be 30% opaque, which means only 30% of it can be seen, the contrast or the value of the line. And I'm just gonna reposition this ring because it was a little off from the last keyframe, and I'll test it, see if it's not shifting anymore. It's looking good. Now we just got to do splashdown. I'm just trying to look at the angle of the drops as they are arching and trying to calculate exactly where they're going to hit on the water surface. So just place down my ring again. And I'm going to resize this a little bit because it's starting to spread outwards as it fades. As you resize it, then you just go down and you warp it, so I'm just gonna undo it, and then we're just gonna try to resize it, just checking to see if it's still in the right place. again, I'm going to try to resize it. Once I do, I just hit apply and it'll be resized. See, as it gets bigger. But also, once the ring starts getting bigger, we're going to have to take and erase a little bit of the sides, because as the ring expands, the water gets calm and it starts stretching out and the ring itself starts breaking up. So I just accomplished this by erasing a little bit of the inside, making it a little bit jagged, so that it looks a little bit more normal, like they're creating little tiny ripple waves on the tension of the surface of the water. Just trying to figure out the thickness of my pen, because I don't want it too dark or too thick, because like I said, as it degrades, you want to make sure that it gets lighter and thinner as it starts dissipating, the wave starts dissipating. Also, you'll notice in nature that even in lines, there's no straight cut or straight lines in nature that occur naturally. So having straight lines that break up the bubble, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't help sell that effect. So I'm just trying to figure out what kind of rings I can use for the ripples on the small droplets. And it's okay to use multiple rings in a little given area. Helps sell that there's little tiny drops dropping everywhere. Adds to the effects, because sometimes you can't, depending on how close you are to the camera, you can't actually see some of the water droplets hit the water. You can only see the effect from those hitting the water, and that's the ripples. So the ripples are very, very important and need to be carefully added to make sure that it enhances your effect and not detract from the effect. Again, I'm just trying to figure out the thickness, because we need to make sure the thickness is relatively the same, but at the same time is not pronounced, so that it does not detract from the rest of the effect. So as you can see, that big huge glob here over on the right hand side that's starting to join together, that is going to hit the surface here in the next frame or two, and we're just going to break the frame, so that way we can reuse the drawing, and then we can just resize everything, erase it, and use the light table to position the next keyframe for the water droplets as they hit the water. So as they hit the water, they kind of like bow up, because it's breaking the surface tension of the water. It's kind of like elastic. It spreads out first and then it comes up and kind of comes concave. But it all happens real fast, more than the eye can catch it. So we're just drawing it on the upward as it comes together. And then we can also adjust the rings that have already been placed for the other droplets, so it kind of like it continues the ripple. I think that is one of the most used tools that I use, is the undo button. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase whatever I don't need on this layer, so that I can adjust it, adjust the ripples that have already been made, including the smaller ones and also the main one. Again, these ripples are very important in order to sell the effect. And then we also gotta draw out the main ripple too as well. Again, I gotta adjust my brush size so it matches the same style. And I'm just gonna draw this out to extend it further. But I'm also doing a little bit lighter because, as I said before, it starts to fade or deteriorate. And we're just going to go ahead and just sketch these out. And the lines don't have to be perfect because they're kind of like going along the surface of the water. And even in the smallest and really calm waters, the surface of the water is always changing. So there's always going to be little tiny micro peaks and valleys, and which will make what looks like a line be more jagged. So I'm just going to erase that a little bit, and we're going to put in a ripple for it. Not too bad, it's coming along really nicely. And so at this point, I mean, it's just a little bit of fine tuning to make sure the ripples are there and that everything is being working, flowing together. As you can see, it's a little fast, so I'll definitely add a couple of frames in between so it kind of slows down the timing or the tempo of the bubble popping. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Oh, no, don't want to create an instance. Okay, now that we extended out the keyframes into as you can see, the timing is a little bit better, a lot smoother. It's right where we want it. Again, like I said, at this point, it's just a little bit of fine tuning. Knowing your tools while you're animating is very important. It helps up your speed your workflow up. I can't iterate that enough or keep telling you enough that, you know, getting to know the interface, getting to know your tools helps a lot. Understanding how the light box works and how, like, you know, how you can set different opacities for each one of these, you know, to view 2 frames or 3 frames back, or 2 frames or 3 frames forward. It helps a lot to visualize and help you visualize what your next step is going to be. So it's good just to play around and get to know the interface a little bit as you work and get to know your tools. There could be a lot of unexpected happy benefits, as they say in the industry, happy accidents. So I'm just fine-tuning this line here to put the bubble out even further, and because, like I said, in nature there's no straight lines, so the more the line looks perfect or the curves look perfect, a lot less natural they look like they belong there in nature. So we're just trying to extend the lines a little bit, make sure they don't look like they've been cut. Just to give them, and you want to offset the lines too, because you gotta, every time you're doing animation, even in 2D animation, you gotta think in 3 dimensions on the stage. And the stage, you know, you gotta visualize where the tension or where the water surface is, where your horizon line is, so that way you can you know, create a realistic or visually compelling animation. As you can see, this works out really well. I think I'm just gonna add, maybe on the bubble, I'm gonna add some reflection on this bubble as it pops out. So it kind of shows the tension of the surface of the bubble itself. So I'm just going to draw on these like little tiny reflective points on top of the bubble. And these will get a little bigger as the bubble goes along and grows. So that way it shows that its size and its proportion is getting bigger on purpose. And again, don't plan out these details, that you just make it as spontaneous as possible so that way it looks more natural. And when placing these bubbles, with the highlight, those are highlights on the bubble to kind of give it that rounded, translucent look to it. Just remember where your light source is coming from so that you know on which direction to paint these highlights. You can go into detail as much as you want to. I'm just adding a couple more on these frames. Just so that the style is carried through from frame to frame. It helps with the continuity and also helps with making the animation a little bit more fluid. Especially if you're animating something that's fluid based. So I'm just going to draw a little bit bigger, so that way it's a little bit more pronounced. So when I just have people look at my things, I don't want them to guess at what it is. I want them to automatically recognize what it is. Just draw these a little bit bigger, erase them up, draw a little bit bigger. And so this about does it. It looks really good. It's giving you that water effect that we're looking for. So you know, just keep on animating, keep on trying out new things, new effects, and next time we'll try something new. So until I see you next time, keep on animating and keep on practicing.